Today I want to talk about spec-driven development specifically for analytics, and I will present a minimal specification format. Spec-driven development has proven its value. In previous videos, I demonstrated how I rebuilt a legacy app from about 500,000 tokens in Markdown files. Here, I now have a modernized app with about 2,500 tests. Great. What else could I use AI for? We wanted an analytics solution for a long time, but we lacked expertise. People who knew the business processes didn't know Power BI, and experts on Power BI didn't know the business processes and were expensive. Could AI come to the rescue? How would we prompt it? Or, in terms of spec-driven development, what was a spec for an analytics solution? I tried it. I used the same spec I had for the business app generation and it worked. Claude Opus 4.8 generated a Power BI project file on request. Not only that, it also, on request, generated scripts to create, populate, and update an OLAP database. Power BI opened the file and displayed a dashboard. With this, it was proven feasible to generate an analytic solution using AI. Not only that, AI made it economically feasible to have an AI solution. The intent that we here codify in these Markdown files, which we call the specification, is the essence of what we want to convey to the AI, namely the business process and the app design. When we do this, we, in theory, create a feedback loop because what the AI generates, including the analytics solution, gives us feedback on what can be improved. And that feedback we can then again codify an intent for changes in the application, and on it goes. Now, the specification format that I had was optimized for the generation of applications, web applications. So it had, for instance, app vision, user interface definitions, domain entity definitions, and a long list of user stories. And these user stories are used for incremental development, so they don't necessarily take the shortest route. These are not the best way to communicate intent for an analytics solution. So then, what is it? What should go in as input to the AI so that it can generate an analytics solution? And we would also like to know what is the minimal analytics spec that is practical and pragmatic. We also have to take into account that we need the OLTP definition, the definition of the application database, also as input to AI, because we don't want to duplicate that. And we already know for sure that that is part of a minimal solution. And we also want that the AI generates a few SQL scripts. It needs to generate a script that creates the OLAP database, that populates that database, and also that updates the database when new data becomes available. Here is my minimal analytics spec. It was conceived in cooperation with AI. It has 5 elements. The most important one is the second. As I said already, you need to have a definition of the OLTP data model, or the SQL that defines database tables, because the scripts that are generated to populate the OLAP database need to use the data from the OLTP database, and you need to know what is in there. The audience and their questions are the most important part of the analytics spec. You have to tell what kind of analytics questions you are interested in. Example, what workflow steps take the most time? It's kind of obvious in retrospect that these questions are the core, and it turned out that AI was able to generate these because I had already an analytics solution, the one that was generated from the very verbose and suboptimal um, specifications that were used to generate the app. Then you have to have some bindings, at least potentially. In theory, you could go behind it, but in practice, the names, for instance, of the tables in the OLTP data model are hardly ever the ones that you want to use in your analytic solution. So you have to have some kind of a mapping. You have to have some definitions of terms, and that is now here called bindings. For instance, an employee referred to as an employee in the analytics solution might have been called a worker in the OLTP database. Duration might have been called number of years. So you have to help it make this translation. Of course, you also have to have an environment. You have to tell it where the OLTP database resides. And then you have to tell what deliverables it needs to generate. So in our case, we want to know or we want to get a Power BI project file, which is a text file or set of text files, and also these scripts that I referred before. I didn't refer to the verify part. Once you have a dashboard, you might look at a visual and say, that's weird. I don't believe that data is correct. So what do you do then? Well, you go back to the OLTP database and you construct a query, a SQL query that gives the same data. And then you compare that with the visual. And if it's not exactly the same, you might also need to have the same query for the OLAP database. Now, what I've asked AI to do in this minimal analytics bank is to generate these scripts as well. So for each tab in the Power BI dashboard, there's a series of queries or query pairs, one for the OLTP and one for the OLAP database. So again, audience and the questions are the most important. And then a last word is about Claude Shannon. Claude Shannon contributed quite a bit to the foundation of the digital age. He conceived information theory, one of my favorite topics in college. It enables us to measure information. And then you can talk about, once you have a number, you can talk about it, about the essence, the minimal specification. And it's funny that Claude, the language model, helped me find that minimal specification. Here you get a glimpse of how this whole specification file looks like. Yes, it's just all in one file. So here I have the 5 steps, and the last one, deliverables, is opened. And you can see here that it says you have to generate these 3 SQL scripts to create the OLAP database, to populate it, and to refresh it. Then the Power BI file, project file. There is some more text needed because you can do this in several ways. And if you don't do it right, Power BI won't open it. I don't know all these details. I just went through a conversation with Claude while it was interacting with Power BI, and out came the conclusion that this is all needed in the specification. So now you have an idea how that would look like. So again, Claude generated all this, and for my next project, I only need to find the audience and their questions, and the glossary. And this I hope to get already because typically the app already exists.